Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Girl Boss Method podcast, hosted by myself, Ritu Bra. Now, on today's episode, if you like, we are joined by a special guest. His name is Joe Frederick. Joe, please explain what you do. Who are you? Why are you here today?
Yeah, I'd love to. So to put it simply, my name is Joe, as Richard's already mentioned, but I am a psychotherapist. So I use the term psychotherapist because that is probably the easiest thing to understand. Working within the field of mental health, there are so many job titles, and they all begin with psycho,
Mm,
which means that it's an absolute minefield. But I am a psychotherapist, and if you want to know the specifics, I'm a psychological well-being practitioner, and I work with people to sort of improve some difficulties that they have. So mostly around feelings of anxiety,
yeah.
feelings of depression, confidence difficulties, sort of phobias and fears of things as well. So it's really a well-rounded sort of, I suppose, role.
Very, very cool. And actually, I wanted you to introduce what you did because, again, like you said, psychotherapist,
Mm.
that's not always in my mind straight away. So I was trying to remember what your title was, but I like that because you've also listed in there quite a few um, broad people basically, or problems that you deal with. So people and problems, right?
Yeah, people
Yeah.
and problems.
Yeah.
So with that, yeah, people just come and say that they have A, B, and C, and then I use X, Y, and Z to hopefully improve what some of those are.
Excellent. Yeah. So I guess that's why I wanted you to come on today and do this podcast with me because we met in the gym and we're having a conversation about what I did and what you did. And I thought, do you know what? I think this would just be amazing to learn a little bit more about what you do, Joe, and also how we can relate that to my clients as well and to fitness as well. Because that, fitness is not just, and even with me in my role, coaching is not just about me giving you exercises to do and telling you what foods to eat. There is so much more to do with that as well. There is a lot of confidence building within that. There is like personal self-development. There's mindfulness, there's change of like lifestyle, there's just so much. So it's just looking at the whole approach, and I know that there's so much that I can learn from you because I am not a psychotherapist, but I feel like sometimes I find myself in those boots a little, especially when I'm trying to encourage people and motivate them. But I'm mostly coming from experience and then just sort of understanding. So within my training, actually, as a nutritionist, we did have like behavioral science, if you like, looking at how behavioral change can help people, and like really learning how to listen and understand what the client's going through, and looking at various different ways of helping them depending on where they are on their journey, because not everyone's given exactly the same, this is what happens when you start with me. You are going to start macro tracking or whatever. We might need to explore a little bit more into how they eat and what they eat and how emotions, etc., if any, kind of connect with all that as well. Because unfortunately, Joe, I'm sure you can agree here, but when it comes to nutrition, it's not just what we're putting in our bodies, it's also how these things are making us feel and what emotional triggers there are when it comes to us choosing A food and B food, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, most definitely, most definitely. And you've definitely touched on quite a few things I think are really, really interesting. And fortunately, I love talking about that.
yeah,
Because there is most definitely a huge and very intricate relationship between, fitness and also your psychology.
mm,
Sort of the brain and the body. It's not just if you fix one, you fix the other. And of course, they are very, very helpful. If you do improve one, then it will lead to, hopefully and in the majority of cases, really good levels of improvement in the other. But you're totally right. It's not just about what you are putting inside of your body. It is very much around, what you think about what you are putting inside of your body, because you can think that everything I'm putting in is methodically put down. I'm tracking everything. I know that it's good for me, but if it's not in line with what you actually want or your values or your goals, then that's going to be a real hindrance in actually following through with your plan for your physical, and vice versa as well. So hopefully I might be able to give a bit of insight into what's going on in people's heads, and you can most definitely, with all of your experience, give a good level of insight as to how the body works and what's good for it on that sense. So I'm very excited to be here, and hopefully you'll be a good complementary force to me and vice versa.
Oh wow, I love that. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's touching on tracking and stuff and how that makes us feel. One thing I won't do, and I really try and discourage my clients from relying on, is this whole thing of, I need a meal plan and that's it. Well, I can't just meet you and give you. So if you were my client, Joe, and you said, look, I want to put on some more muscle, or whatever it was that you wanted to do, whatever your goals were, and I said, yeah, okay, eat this. That doesn't align to your values, and it doesn't align to your likes, and to what food should be enjoyed as well to a certain degree. If your diet completely consisted of like cream cakes and bags of Skittles every day, then we might have to have some more conversations about trying to encourage a variety of other healthful foods. So again, not blindly thinking that you get to eat what you want and that's it. There will be ways of and this is why like food diaries and stuff are really important. I've had a little bit of feedback there.
Oh no. Can you still hear the feedback?
Can I hear the feedback? No, that's okay now. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I can't hear it on my end. So if it does pop up, then please do tell me. I'll try and sort of wiggle around where I am. Hopefully that sort of fixes things.
Yeah. Well, that's the realness of this podcast, really, because although I've been doing this, and this is like episode number 34 or something, or 35 coming up that we're doing today, I am by no means a master at this. So again, technical stuff, guys, for you listening. Me and Joe went over a little bit of how to set things up. So yeah, it's easy. You just kind of plug things in and get on with it. But it's not, neither of us are in a professional studio here. But yeah, anyway, for those of you watching on YouTube, you will be able to see where we are. But yes, back to the topic. Yeah. Giving someone just like a prescriptive eat X, Y, and Z is not going to help them, because A, it's not teaching them anything. You're also making them do things that make them feel unhappy. I had a client, she's actually come to me now. She was previously with someone else who told her that she couldn't eat certain things because she wouldn't be able to get the results that she wanted. So she's more aligned with like a more of a vegetarian, pescatarian type diet lifestyle. But she was told that she couldn't get goals or achieve her goals without eating specifically what this previous coach had said. And look, there are so many amazing coaches out there, and I get them on the podcast and stuff as well from time to time, and I'm definitely not anyone that's gonna put anyone else down. That's not how we grow and how we do things here. But it just, it highlighted how unhappy she was with that. Some people, it might work. If the food isn't really a big deal and you'll eat anything, that's fine. Yeah. So I'm talking lots here.
I was going to say, just a comment on that. Something that we talk quite a lot about sort of when in therapy and in general, I think it quite nicely segues into the conversation that you're mentioning there, is just the idea of values. And we do a lot of values work in order to encourage and develop new behaviors, because essentially it's a lot easier to develop a new behavior if it is in line with what you believe in, essentially. And obviously we have values and beliefs about absolutely everything, and particularly around food. And it sounds like that your client at the time, her values are, it might be that, without, I don't know anything about the client, but it maybe if they're vegetarian or pescatarian, then they might be someone who is more inclined to sort of having strong opinions about animal welfare and things like that. And so they want to make sure that their diet and that their obviously fitness, which is linked
Yeah.
with diet,
Yeah.
is also reflective of that. And that then extends outside of themselves, that when you have a coach, because you also want a coach that is going to be putting something in place that is receptive to and
Yes.
is also taking into account your values. So it sounds like that was a bit of a bad misfit for that client and that previous coach, because clearly maybe they weren't taking into account that person's values within their plan, and
Yeah.
obviously prescribing something that maybe doesn't quite fit their
Yeah.
overall goals, and therefore makes it harder for them to make those behavioral changes. So as opposed to then hear that, they come over to yourself and, it sounds like that you've taken that into account. That's a really, really big thing. And it's really, really important when you are making changes, which is obviously at the core of dieting, at the core of fitness for a lot of people as well. So it sounds like that is the right step to be taking moving forwards. And I suppose that's just sort of how I see that linking into what I do day to day. So it's definitely positive to hear that change has happened, and I think it sounds like it would be really beneficial for that individual too.
Yeah, no, definitely. But again, it's, exactly as you've said as well. That's something that I've learned in my training as well as a nutritionist. So again, it's not just about food. Again, it's everything else. It's emotions, it's behaviors. And yeah, it's also, there's a lot of education out there as well that, you can offer someone and they can start to make that informed decision themselves. And you've got like shared ownership on their journey, on how they practice things and how they get through. Because if something was to happen to me tomorrow and I decided not to coach anymore, I would like my clients to still be able to do this. Like, this is not just me saying our journey is just between A and B time. It's for the next 6 months. It's for the years after that. It's for the next 6 years. Like, this is something that I want women, when they're on my program, to learn and to understand. If that they can do this on their own. It's just tweaking a few things, and then also just looking at how this all relates to longevity as well. So it's not just the here and now. It's not a 12-week shred and that's it. We are looking at the bigger, the longer picture. So typically I do work with my clients for a longer time, and that is because there's changes need time to take place as well. They need time to settle in, that you need to grow through that journey. It's not just A to B and that's it. There's so much more on that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when we're talking something like diet and exercise. There's a reason why it's pretty unanimous that they say that, you need to make sure you have a good diet and regular exercise throughout your entire life. It's not something that you do for a 12-week shred and then those effects then are in place for the next 5 years. And then you can wait 5 years before you do another 12-week shred. It's very much something that needs to be consistent. And, depending on which side of the coin you look at, you can say, oh, that's great, fantastic. Or on the other side, you might think, oh gosh, now I have to put in effort over the long term.
Yeah.
But it has to be done. It has to be done. And usually when you do put that effort in over the long term, you torture yourself enough to that you begin to love it anyway. So, so
Yeah,
it's all good.
exactly. And on that, actually, I wanted to start asking you, like, just a few more questions in terms of like the self-development and the self-esteem. So like the changing of oneself. So like when we're thinking, about fitness, is that something, so how can I mean, do you tell your clients to think about fitness, and how that relates to them building, so in terms of helping someone build their self-confidence, their self-esteem, in that whole personal development thing, do you talk to them about fitness and do you talk to them about nutrition? Do you feel like there's something to be said about how this all relates in terms of your
Yeah.
therapies?
Yeah, we definitely do. It's essentially the way that I look at it. is something that I personally push quite a lot. So I'm very much into fitness. I try to make sure that I do some form of exercise every day, even if it's
Yeah.
just a little walk. And that's just from personal experience that it helps me to relax. It helps me to maintain a just sort of a happier me, really. But if we're talking about within the actual sort of sphere of therapy and mental health, again, even I guess removing my personal biases, it is something that is very, very important. It's something that a lot of practitioners do preach, because it sets a strong foundation. Like we spoke about earlier, and like you've spoken about as well, the body and the mind are very, very heavily linked towards each other, and you need a strong foundation in order to actually make any changes, sort of psychologically. The way that I look at it is that, and a very common example and a metaphor that I always use is that if someone has difficulties, with anxiety, with depression, with confidence, or anything like that, I like to think of it as, let's say you're in a 100-meter race, and there's 10 competitors or whatnot, all on the sort of the zero or the start mark. If you're not putting the right food in your body, essentially what you're doing is you're setting yourself back 10 meters. If you're not sleeping properly, you're setting yourself back another 10 meters. If you're not, doing other things that are just important in day to day, outside of fitness, if you're not interacting with other people, humans are innately social characters and social creatures, and whether people want to argue against it or for it, social interaction is also good for us. So you're setting
Mm.
yourself back another 10 meters. So what you can end up doing is, if you're actually neglecting some of these very literal basic needs, you're essentially trying to run a 130-meter race when everyone else is running a 100-meter race. So oftentimes, one of the first things that I'll always ask my clients is just like, well, how's your sleep? What are you eating?
Yeah.
How's your movement and things like that? And oftentimes, before we even get to thinking about what the main problem is, I personally think it's really important just to be able to think, well, what's your lifestyle like?
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying it's going to fix everything. And I'm not saying that that is the pill that we need to look at. But what it does do is that it just puts you on the right foundation. You're building on concrete rather than building on sand. And with that, you can then put that in place first and then get to the point of, okay, well, what are the sort of, I guess, psychological difficulties that are in place? So things like fitness, things like diet and nutrition, they are, and they most definitely do have a real place within therapy, within psychological
Mhm.
support. I personally like to think it's at least sort of 50% of the battle, and these are things that are a lot. I guess you could argue, and I suppose I can say at this point, they're easier to change in the sense that you can do something about them quicker.
Yeah.
Um, but they might not be easier to change because obviously from, I suppose, the other side of the coin, making a change to your lifestyle in terms of your diet or making a change to your fitness, it takes a long time and it takes a lot of effort in that sense. But technically, you could, for example, wake up one day and say, okay, well, I'm just going to change some of the foods that I eat. Technically, that is a very quick change, although it's more difficult to sustain that. So I guess it's easier and it's also more difficult. So yes, most definitely, they are a real important part of therapy, the mind, working with people in general.
Yeah. I, listening to all of that, I don't deal with anyone at your level, that your clients and stuff, but I know that there are things that we all experience as individuals and people that haven't taken that step towards fitness or anything, or looking at their nutrition and things. I feel like for my clients, I get messages back and they'll be like, I feel like a different person. So it's changed their life already. They're like, wow, this is definitely not an approach. I wouldn't have approached this problem like this if it hadn't have been for taking hold of my nutrition and my fitness. So I think it works both ways, that actually engaging in that physical fitness, engaging good nutrition, like you're fixated on something that's going to do good for you internally, and the long term, but also there's that nice sense of achievement. You know, you've committed to something. Again, it can help set you up for the day as well. You can feel more energized, like it can help you sleep better. There's just so many things that, like, I found that it kind of spurs on, like, other good things happen. You'll be in a better mood state. You are gonna interact with others around you nicer, like in a I don't know, I can't think of the words, but you're just gonna have a better relationship around with yourself and other people as well, and it can help strengthen your relationships as well. So
Yeah, for certain, for certain. I mean, obviously, I think one of the things that's really important, or one of the biggest psychological benefits from being more consistent with something like fitness and diet is, well, firstly, it gives you a goal to work towards, and oftentimes gives people a sense of direction. Now, obviously, too much of anything is bad for you, and overfixation on this obviously has its own drawbacks. Can lead to sort of anxiety around food, having negative self-perceptions if you're not able to stick to things as rigidly. And we that's another thing in therapy that we talk about, sort of we call them sort of cognitive thinking traps. And we're really, really careful around these sorts of things. Because, for example, high and inflexible standards is one that I think is very heavily shown within sort of nutrition and the fitness industry, and that we all think that we need to be, following a extremely rigid, extremely strict nutrition and fitness plan. And if we don't do that, then we beat ourselves up and think that we're the worst person in the world. But I suppose from a healthier perspective, just having a general goal and something to work towards is really, really helpful, because it can really help foster a sense of discipline, really. And I'm a firm believer that discipline is really, really important, and that discipline is actually one of the highest sort of levels of self-care that you can really give to yourself. Because if you're able to sort of stay consistent and keep promises to yourself, that in itself is directly correlated with having better sort of self-esteem and greater confidence. Because essentially, I've got some sort of, I suppose, insight into the psychology behind self-esteem, but just thinking on a more basic level, self-esteem essentially can be built up by just keeping promises to yourself.
Love that.
It's basically, I say that I'm going to do something and I do it. And essentially what you do is you become more confident in your ability to do the things that you want to do and that you say that you're going to do. And then that over time leads to building that inner sense of confidence. I think a lot of people do get a bit muddled and a bit sort of caught up as to, well, how do I develop confidence? Do I need to do A, B, and C in order to go ahead and become the most confident person in the world? Well, no. I mean, I'd argue the most confident people in the world oftentimes lead the most boring lives, and that's because they essentially are going ahead and just doing the things that they know that they need to do on a regular basis and sticking to that. But I mean, self-esteem, there is a lot of psychological work into it, which I can get into if you want me to give a little bit of a summary. But to put it very simply, one of the easiest ways to build that self-esteem is to keep promises to yourself, which again can be very, very difficult. And that's why, not everybody is the most confident version of themselves.
Yeah, I like that. And it's a journey as well. I really like the whole keeping promises to yourself. And I think from my own personal experience as well, it's taken time to, like, again, I'm giving those promises to myself. Believe it or not, when I first started this podcast, I was just like really like unconfident about it. Like, oh my God, how's this gonna look? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna talk about? Are people gonna judge me? That sort of thing, worrying about how I'm coming out doing this. But with practice and with creating those little promises to myself, I mean, you said this yourself, I'm literally throwing out 2 to 3 of these per week if I can, like time dependent. And I'm actually caring less about how it looks or how, in terms of, like, I obviously want people to benefit from this, but I don't want this to be, I want to get a message out, but I don't want this to be about perfection. I want us to take, you know, look, I've got a mentor and it's messy action. Just do the thing, just get it done. Forget about how this all looks or how it comes out after. And I feel like people can relate with that as well, a whole lot more. I think when you try and be perfect at things and even live a like this perfect life, and you know, it's not a switch that confidence just suddenly happens. It's a journey, and I think it's a journey that we're all developing. Like, I'm pretty sure if you were to ask me, Joe, like, I sound pretty confident. People think I'm pretty confident. But if you were to go and ask me to go and stand up and talk in front of 400 people or 4,000 people, I think you would just see my cheeks go like from brown to like red. I would stutter loads. I'd probably start sweating loads. And, you know, again, it's practice, isn't it? It's getting comfortable with these things that feel nervy, that feel like you're not ready for them. You know, it's building on that strength, really. It's practice. It's practice, it's promises, it's all the things that you've said. And I love that. And I know, I feel like you're about to say something on this topic or about the worrying less.
Yeah, so just I suppose just final thing about that topic, I suppose before sort of jumping on, I just wanted to really recognize and say is that oftentimes, you know, when I've mentioned the idea of keeping promises to yourself, the reason why I think that's so foundational is because if you do force yourself to keep promises, then you are or will end up exposing yourself to more. And the more that you expose yourself to things, the more that you can see essentially how you react when things go right and also how you react when things go wrong. And that is I suppose, whether it's a sort of conscious journey or not, obviously, if you're more reflective on these things, then you will notice more. If you're not as reflective, then nonetheless, you will still pick up on these things, but maybe not to the same degree. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is that you learn to understand yourself and you learn to understand what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. And having those understandings is what is also a big part of developing the idea of self-esteem, because it's about keeping those promises, knowing that things are going to be okay in the end. And even if they don't go okay, then you know that you have that confidence to say, well, I'm going to be able to manage. And oftentimes that is at the real foundation of some of the most confident people that we might know, is that they know that they're going to be okay and therefore they feel okay to give it a crack.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So again, I'm going to sort of switch topic or kind of move on a little bit. So the next one I wanted to talk about was, how do we stop worrying less about what other people think? Because that's something that I know that I've had to overcome. Believe it or not, I've made this amazing program. I've become more present on social media in the last sort of 10 to 15 months. It's really hard getting out there and exposing yourself. You know, you're exposing your vulnerabilities, you're opening yourself up to criticism. How do we stop ourselves worrying about other people? And so when I say this as well, like, I've had conversations with women as well, where they've said that they actually feel like they're going to be judged for actually wanting to take a step towards working on their health and fitness. And they're worried that people are going to judge what they're eating. So if they feel aligned to their goals and they feel aligned to what they're eating, and you know they're on a journey, they feel worried that other people are going to have something to say, whether it's at social events or whether it's just other people making comments about how they're eating. So, you know, like, for example, you know, there's that whole thing of like, when you're eating healthy, like, everyone seems to think you're on a diet. Like, when you're just eating nutritious food that's good for you, everyone seems to think that it's like this big thing. Oh, what are you working towards? But when you're eating things like crisps and biscuits, and you know, your diet is very processed and it's just very like high in sugars and fats and salt and whatever, when it's just really like there's no micronutrients in there. There's no real attention to even the macronutrient spread of what we're eating. That seems to be fine. Nobody really has anything to say. They don't make comments and go, oh, you should really think about eating better. It's always, if we're eating more healthful, it's always, oh, why are you eating like that?
Yeah, I think definitely a couple of things to unpack there.
Yeah.
I think jumping back to the first thing that you mentioned around, people being worried about fear of judgment, being worried about people saying things or thinking things when they make some changes towards working on themselves or make changes towards eating. I think firstly, I think it's really important to recognize that that is a super, super common fear and a super, super common thing that a lot of people deal with. Um, because essentially what we're doing is we are making a change, and obviously when we're making changes, people notice, particularly the people around us. So I think to sort of highlight that and to say that that is a worry, I think is really important to know that, you're not by yourself. A lot of people are in that same boat. I mean, the reason as to why people might do that, I mean, I suppose there's lots of different reasons. Maybe because, going back to what you mentioned around the way that people comment when people eat certain foods. If the majority is doing something, and then the minority then begins to do something, then the majority will always have something to say in the majority of cases, because obviously it stands out. It definitely does stand out. And that is a very difficult thing to sort of reconcile. Even if you are doing something that is good for you, it can be hard to then have to deal with that additional dialogue, particularly from people who are important to you. Now, I suppose in terms of how we might be able to deal with that, there's something that I think is quite helpful, and I talk to my clients a lot about it, which is the idea of something that's called locus of control. So to put that very simply, locus of control is basically looking at what is internal and what is external. So an internal locus of control is somebody who focuses on things that are that they can change and influence. So that could be absolutely anything that you have direct influence over. It could be, let's say, what you do day to day, how you eat, whether you exercise, all of those sorts of things. Whilst external locus of control is everything that is completely outside of us. So the weather, I mean, I don't control the weather. I don't know if you do, Richie, but that is usually outside our control. And I think where this relates to this conversation, it's what other people think about us, because some people might argue, well, no, Joe, I can do certain things and I can do this because that's what my husband or that's what my wife is saying, and that means that they will be more likely to be happy with me, and therefore I've impacted what they think. It's like, well, you can do all the right things in the world, and other people can still think that you're an idiot. And with that, we don't have any control over what other people think about us. So it is a purely external thing. So what we try to do is learn to identify or help that person understand, what is it that they are worried about? What is it that they're fearful? Is that internal? Is it external? If it's internal, can we do something about it? Great. If it's external and we can't do anything about it, then we need to think about how we're going to either change the way that we view that situation or change the way that we interact with it. So whether that be, if we do notice that people are making a lot of comments, then, we might offer an explanation. And hopefully with offering an explanation saying, look, this is what I want to do. I'm making some changes. I think it's going to be good for me. And, I'd appreciate it if, you didn't talk badly about it or anything like that. And hopefully if you're talking to someone that cares about you, that should be enough. But obviously in the off chance that isn't, and people are beginning to sort of, I suppose, make those judgments, make those sort of viewpoints, and I suppose it's a bit of a question of, how can I get this message across if I really do care about this person, and if I don't care about them too much, then how can I maybe limit my interaction with them as much, which is a difficult, I suppose, kind of situation to be in, because it might be that the people that we do really care about are having these negative reactions, but if someone does really, really care about us, then they should be able to accept that we are making these changes, particularly if those changes are good for us,
Yes.
because they should want us to be doing better. They really should. And I'm not saying that we should go around with a I don't care what other people think mentality. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes you need to protect your peace. And, protecting your peace can mean, distancing yourself from certain people or people that don't agree with what it is that you want to do. Because the people that will want to protect your peace will be open to conversation, should be open to understanding and accepting, changes that you are making, particularly if they're around, health and fitness, because they shouldn't want you to live a long life. They don't want you to be eating rubbish and then putting yourself back. So that's definitely a good place to start, I would say.
I think that's so interesting about how you said, like, people should be supportive of your journey, but people should also want you to live a long life. Health and fitness is not just about looking good on the beach and being obsessed with, your body image. That's not what it is. It's longevity. It's knowing that you're less susceptible to, illnesses or diseases as well, diseases out there. So we're thinking about things like, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, lots and lots of things that are going to happen when you are not taking care of yourself. So it's not just, having, this obsession, or people might think you've got an obsession with how you look and how you want to be, who do you think you are type thing. There's so much more to that. And I think, again, maybe that's something that comes with time. And as people get older, they realize that actually having a healthy body and a healthy mind is a gift. And it's something that we should really think about taking care of and not taking advantage of. And people around us should realize that. They should realize that you want to look after yourself. What's wrong with that? And again, I would also put it that maybe the other person feels like they feel a way about themselves because it's something that they're not doing themselves, that they feel like by you opening up and actually sharing what you're going through, that maybe they're worried about they have a fear of judgment on themselves. They're not sure if you saying that you're on this journey is maybe slightly, I can't think of the words, but that you've got something negative to say about what they're doing about their lives. You're hinting at them that they should be doing something themselves, and they feel, so again, it's not always just about what we feel. It's the fear of other people, they're not receptive because there's something going on with them as well. But I think it's really important that another thing to mention here is creating that community and having people around you that support you on your journey. So if your friends are not happy with what you're doing, then you need to dump your friends. Sorry. You either need to have those tough conversations, uncomfortable conversations, or you need to leave them in the past and move forward, because we are not going to keep the same friendships throughout life. As we grow in different directions. We grow as people, we develop, we find different things that we like. You're not going to have the same friends that you might have done when you were 13. It's not going to happen. I mean, even speaking from my perspective, I do not have the same set of friends that I had at 21. That's just the way life goes. You change. I'd say that I've older friends and younger friends, and it's not to say that we're going to have the same things in common all the time, but just for being able to say you've got that same set of friends, I've known them for so long. I think it's more than that. It's about where you are in life, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the friends piece is quite interesting. And it
Have you
made
got
me
something
laugh
to
when you said
say?
if you've got
Yeah.
friends, if you got friends, if you got friends that are holding you back, get rid of them. That definitely made me laugh. But there is definitely a lot of truth in that. And I think going on the idea of the friendships that you do have, I think that also illustrates, just how important it is to have a community around you that share your same values.
Yeah.
Going back to the point that you mentioned around the client who had a trainer who didn't or wasn't, I suppose, putting in place a plan that was centered around the sort of values of that person. That just goes to show how important it can be and how much of an impact it can be. And particularly the majority of the time, or majority of the reason why people might not have the same friends throughout their entire life is because, yeah, your values are completely different when you're 18 to when you're 50, or
Yeah.
when you're 21 to when you're 40. These things change, and some people are very lucky. They meet people when they're younger and they stay friends throughout the entire time because they are literally just, I don't know, they're kindred spirits. They seem to have grown in the same direction. But the likelihood is that the majority of the people that you do meet throughout your life, you will grow in different directions, and there's nothing wrong with that. Particularly if you notice that the direction that you want to grow in is something that's important to you, and the people around you are holding you back and don't want you to really grow in that direction, then yeah, that's a tough conversation you have to have with yourself, and particularly with those other people, in order to maintain, I suppose, your own trajectory, and where you want to be as well. So definitely, when we're thinking about other people and worrying about what other people think, there's a lot of things that can be done within ourselves, but ultimately, it is a lot of the time it is about damage reduction and just trying to make sure that the situations that we're in or these environments that we're in are allowing or are nurturing the growth that we want in our direction, in the direction that we want. And I suppose there's a lot of there's a whole list of ways that we might begin to have that conversation within therapy and different techniques and ideas that we might do, but fundamentally that's kind of the truth of it. And yeah, there's just lots of different ways in order to get to that destination, but that's what I personally, and I'm sure lots of other therapists do, we try to encourage that authenticity that comes with making those decisions, because ultimately, authenticity is what really drives a lot of positive behavioral change and helps us to maintain, I suppose, our growth in our lives the way that we want it to. So yeah, really interesting point, Richie.
Yeah, no, thank you as well. I feel like already we've talked about and touched on so many topics already. I think maybe, I mean, how are you for time?
I'm good to
You
keep
are
going.
okay, perfect. Same here. So yeah, I wanted us to really, I only really had one last topic that I wanted us to talk about, but I think this one is definitely something that I know that it's going to help a lot of people out there, especially when it comes to nutrition. Especially now as we're coming in towards, Christmas, that time between Christmas and New Year's. We're getting a little bit of feedback again, aren't we? Yeah, so I think it's just really important that we talk about this topic, because even after Christmas and New Year, coming into the all these darker months and stuff, like people generally, I don't know if you've had this. Do you find that people are a little bit more, they're low in spirits around Jan and Feb, January blues? Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're thinking about that stuff, this is where I really want us to talk about next, or go next, was the emotional management of like eating and habits as well, healthy eating and habits. So I want us to talk a little bit about emotional eating and how when people feel sad, they feel negative, they feel demotivated, they feel like they have to go down this rabbit hole of, I don't know, that self-sabotage, that if they're not seeing progress, if they feel like they've undone good work, they get set back. They look, everyone's going to put on a few more pounds over Christmas and New Year's. It's normal. Fitness professionals will as well. That's why you'll see everyone just raving about the January cut, and I may or may not be going down that route as well. But I think this time of year is to be enjoyed. Yes, it does involve a lot more going out, your more social events, more festivities, more activities, more like drinking, eating, food. And look, you're not going to be able to stick to your goal as hard as you might be at other times of year. And so what I'm really trying to get at here is that as a result of putting on a few more pounds, not heading down that self-sabotage route of the emotional eating and like almost like we're kind of talking in a little bit into the sort of binging as well, potentially, and the self-harm that you're doing as well by not eating healthful, but almost like criminalizing yourself for not making progress over this sort of Christmas, New Year's period. And then just go, oh my God, what's the point? Who cares about my goals? I'm never going to change. Nothing ever goes right. I'm never going to be like that person. So of course there's a little bit of comparison that comes in here as well, when you're looking at how other people look and then like not looking at your own journey and just heading down that who gives a crap like mentality, and just, yeah. Anyway, emotional eating and management. So yes, give us a little bit of an insight into it, anything that you've experienced in that realm.
Yeah, so this is a really, really interesting point, because you've touched on so many different things in that little bit that you just mentioned there. And to be honest, I think you could do like, I could talk about this literally for hours and hours. We could probably do like an entire 2 hour seminar on just
I
this topic.
feel like
Um,
that. Yeah.
but because there's lots of layers to it. I suppose I'll just sort of give the sort of layers that I've noticed, I suppose, because
Yes.
firstly, the first thing you mentioned is around January blues, and just wintertime blues, really. So typically in mental health services, January, December, basically all of the months where it is darker, people access services more often. And there is even a sort of classification of depression, which is focused specifically on just the winter months. So
I
it's
say
called,
it.
yeah,
Sad. Is
yeah,
it?
it is sad. Yeah.
Yay! Seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, perfect,
Okay.
perfect. And there's lots of sort of stuff out there to try and help that. So you have like SAD lights as well.
Oh yeah.
SAD lights are for SAD, because essentially with there being less sunlight, it actually does have an impact on our mood. Sunlight and vitamin D does have a positive impact on our sort of overall well-being and just general mood improvements. So that, I think, is one, I suppose that could be that bit of a base layer. And obviously some of the knock-on effects of that is that if people are feeling worse, because it is darker, it is colder, and typically our environment does affect us, what do? You tend to do things or you try to do things that make you feel better. And oftentimes we reach for some of the wrong things, or maybe not the wrong things. We reach for some of the easier things in order to give ourselves the boosts. So it could be that we start eating more food, because food is and does release, endorphins, dopamine, which are the feel-good sort of neurotransmitters in our brains and in our bodies, and then that in itself makes us feel a little bit better, but just because of maybe the types of things that we're eating, if you're then putting that in combination with our fitness goals, that is against, I guess, the fitness goals that we do have, which then means that we're going to be then feeling worse for it. Oftentimes as well, eating things like junk food, it makes us feel good for a small period of time, but
Yeah.
afterwards, it can then make us feel worse in the long run.
I wanted to touch on something there as well, just as you're kind of talking. So although I've mentioned the overeating, post January, people hit starvation mode as well. They all of a sudden they need a detox, and they
Mm,
go and spend money on juices and stuff. Um,
mm,
and they do these ridiculous diets where they just suddenly they're eating, I don't know, they're consuming 500 calories a day, and
mm,
all of that has a knock-on effect. And it's that yo-yo dieting that, unfortunately, yeah, I see it with a lot of women. They've done that in the past. It's, yeah, gosh, even, you know what, Joe, even yeah, even some, I'm not going to say who they are, obviously, then this is always quite difficult, but they're not a client of mine, but somebody that I know and I've known really like a long, long time. They are actually trained within this same area of food, and they talk about detoxes and going on a detox, and I just literally go, just why are you doing this to yourself? Oh, I've just eaten really bad. Oh, I've just been eating loads of shit and junk food and blah blah blah, and I've like totally messed up over the holidays. I'm going to go on a detox. And it's like, you don't need to do that. That's let's draw a line on it and let's get back to healthy habits, right? I'd love to coach this person because I feel like they really need help, but that because they're also trained in not the same nutrition as me, but in a different area of nutrition. Maybe more to do with like the NHS stuff, but they, for some reason, they think that doing a detox is something that's fixing them. And that's a whole completely, that's a different topic in itself. But that, yes, I just wanted to kind of add in that bit about starvation
Yeah.
as well and detox.
Yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And that sort of feeds quite nicely into another piece, sort of that we see quite a lot within sort of therapy. So going back to the idea of sort of thinking traps or cognitive thinking traps, um, we talk quite heavily around the idea of all or nothing thinking. So all or nothing thinking is essentially, I mean, what it says on the tin is when things are black or white, they're either good or they're bad. And oftentimes a lot of people don't give themselves much of a gray area, if a gray area at all. They think that it has to be that I rigidly stick to this plan that I've paid for, that I've been given, and if I deviate or slip from it, I have an extra glass of wine, I have an extra snack throughout the day. They think, well, that's it. I've fucked this. I'm just gonna go and just go all in, basically.
Yeah.
And with that, then it then leads to, that sort of yo-yo effect that you've spoken about there. So, eating very, very badly and then come back up again on the yo-yo, and then they do the detox or the starvations or whatever it is that
Extreme
people do.
restriction. Yeah.
Yeah, being very restricted in what they're eating, etc. And that in itself is a really good example of that all or nothing thinking. And that's something that we try to sort of work through within therapy. It's something that we try to question and look at whether it is as I suppose productive for our lives as we might necessarily think it to be. Because, I suppose if you're thinking about it just from like an outside lens, I guess it would kind of make sense in that, okay, well, I've overindulged here, so I'm going to underindulge here, and therefore it will level out. But unfortunately, lifestyle isn't quite as simple as maths. It's not like you add two and therefore I'm going to subtract two and now I'm back at a neutral, or I'm back at zero where I should be. It doesn't quite work like that. So
No.
what you have to do is begin thinking, okay, well, what can I do in order to, I suppose, just get myself back onto track, and not quite think in such like a binary, or quite think in such a, all or nothing kind of mindset, really. Because all or nothing thinking makes habit formation and developing new behaviors or just making lifestyle changes really, really difficult, because it's almost a case of you're not giving yourself any time to relax. You're not giving yourself any self-compassion or
Yeah.
any sort of self-care in that sense. And if you're not able to do that, then you're not going to be able to maintain it, because you're either going to burn out from trying to be so strict with yourself, or you're just going to give up. And
Yeah.
either way, both of those end with you not actually achieving what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
So it is really, really difficult. And it does make sense why people do these things, because everything that people do, there is a logical reason for it, or there is a line of logic. Whether that logic is sound, that's the next question. But like we mentioned around the yo-yoing, there is a line of logic to that. If I've eaten too much, I'll eat less, and therefore I should be good. But unfortunately, reality doesn't quite reflect that. The logic can be there in terms of the way that we think of it, but it doesn't mean that it's sound. So we just need to think about how we might be able to reassess some of the ways that we are thinking.
Yeah.
And, sometimes we need guidance around that. Sometimes we
Of
need a
course.
coach in order to be
Yes.
able to point those things out. And you know, doctors go to doctors when they have health problems. Dentists don't
Yeah.
do their own dentist work. So, there's no harm at all in going and speaking to someone else, even if you are trained in that certain profession,
Agreed.
or just seeing,
Yeah.
seeing a specialist and investing that time, investing, that resource into having someone that you think has the knowledge and can actually go ahead and do that. So, something like having a coach can be really, really helpful, particularly if you're not really too sure, or you think you need to make some changes, but you're not quite sure what to make those changes. It's the whole point why people go to therapists in the first place. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. And hopefully, people can begin to explore other alternatives to the almost yo-yo lifestyle that they may experience.
Exactly. And I actually just recorded a training yesterday, coming up to this period now as well. So I guess this is sort of my way of not tackling it, but allowing people to understand flexibility. So yeah, we were talking about calories and pre-planning as well. So I always try and encourage my clients to pre-plan when they are going out, because if there are days that, and again, it's just having a mindful structure around our goals, allowing for our goals, but then also just being open-minded and thinking, right, this is going to happen here, so I'll do X here. So rather than doing it on the back end, which, if I'm honest, I feel like that's way more harmful on the back end when you are trying to restrict for overindulging. Whereas when you are mindfully allowing a strategic increase to accommodate days out, evenings out, extra meals, etc., social events, I feel like that's so much better, and that's a better approach. And again, that is something where, you know, you need to be coached with that, and we need to have that conversation. If you're my client, to kind of talk about how to tackle, if you want to, and again, having your mind in the right zone really for that. And it's not for everybody, but I know that it's a really good way. It's a tactical way of being mindful of the things that are about to come up and strategically planning in advance, so that it's not, like you say, an all or nothing. It's not like I'm just going to go wild and that's it. It's actually thinking, okay, well, these are your goals, that you really want to achieve this goal, that we are going to pre-plan how you might, or give you options as to how you might approach that event, for example. So it's not like I'm going to just shut my eyes and eat everything. It's, I'm going to pick and choose, right? I'm going to decide, instead of having like, if you're somebody who loves desserts and stuff, everyone doesn't eat just one dessert at Christmas, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Just getting that out there. I definitely don't just have one, right? There'll be a mince pie, there'll be ice cream, there'll be like a panettone, there'll be all sorts of apple crumble, whatever. But it's making the choice beforehand and going, right, I'm only going to have X of this, and this. I can still have all of those, but I'm not going to be overindulging. I'm not going to be going over the top, right? I'm not going to have a full slice of everything. I'm going to have a little of everything, and maybe put it all on one plate and have a bit of everything, not like repeated, going up. Well, okay, I've had that. Now I'm going to go back up and go and have another full serving of X. So I think it's just being mindful about that. Is that something that you support and agree with as a therapist, when it comes to having good eating mindfulness as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important that if you're getting to a point where you're trying to be more conscious of with your eating, and you're trying to be a bit more conscious, let's just take eating for right now, because obviously that's what we're talking about at the moment.
Yeah.
Becoming more conscious of that, it is essentially, you have to learn to be more choosy, and you have to learn, I guess, to structure your own diet, essentially, because that's what you're doing. You're reconstructing your diet. So if you do notice that when it gets to these periods of time that you do just sort of, and I don't know what the food equivalent of seeing red is, where the red mist comes over and you just do what, you wake up and like, oh my gosh, I've done it. Or whether the
Yeah.
equivalent is just, I see red and I go and eat loads of food. Then I think that having a plan as to, what it is that you are going to eat, I think that's much better than just fumbling around in the dark.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's like any new skill, you need to put in place a bit of structure. If I'm going to learn the guitar, I might just say to myself, okay, all right, just to begin with, I'm going to make sure that I do 10 minutes every single day. So if I'm just coming into sort of, I suppose, getting used to my new diet and my new routine, then having a sense of structure and saying, okay, well, it's Christmas, so I'll allow myself to have X of the apple crumble, X of the mince pie, etc. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you doing that, and you're doing that in a safe and healthy way that isn't
Yes.
detrimental to your body, then go crazy, or maybe don't go too crazy, because obviously that's the whole point of of having the diet anyway. But yeah, I think that it's better to have a bit of a plan rather than to have no plan at all,
Yeah.
particularly if you're at that point when you are trying to make those beginning changes.
Yeah.
You know, if you're someone that has already made these lifestyle changes and it's just like, okay, well, you know, I'm just more than happy with just having, you know, one dessert. And obviously you don't really
Yeah.
need to be so mindful. You don't need to make a plan in that sense. So I think that that's definitely a good plan for someone that is, I suppose, maybe on those more beginning stages, or feel that this might be a period of time where they might fall off the wagon a little bit. And I definitely don't have anything bad to say about that, or any sort of strong disagreements whatsoever.
Yeah, I think also by me saying that and having that planned structure in place, I also don't want my clients to feel like they can't have anything. Like,
Mm,
oh my God, I've, you know, I'm on a program and I've got to do X and I can't do this. Like, I don't want people to
mm,
be restricting themselves. I don't want them to become obsessive, you know, about going out and going, no, I can't have anything, and refusing. I think it needs to be genuine, and I think there needs to be informed decision making when it comes to making those choices as well. I don't think it's just, you know, it's giving the tools to someone and them actually thinking for themselves and going, actually, do I really want this, or am I just having it because it's there? You know, it's like that. I guess you could say that it's something that I used to say years ago when I would talk about people who would have extreme alcohol issues, right? Or when they'd go out on a night out. It's like drinking so much as if the bar is like you're on a all inclusive, a bit as if the bar is about to take off and leave. Like
mm,
that's what people do, is like they binge and they go, oh my God, just for the sake of. And I'll actually be quite open here that when I first went vegan, I had this like obsessive mindset of wanting to try everything and have everything. um I have talked about this before as well, maybe not on here, but in some of my social media posts, that I think especially when I first went vegan, um I was uneducated on really how to structure my meals and stuff, and how to accommodate goals, etc. I didn't really understand so much about nutrition back then. And B, if I was out anywhere and there was food on offer, because that food wasn't always available in like my hometown where I'm from, like I couldn't get X, Y, and Z, I would literally be like, oh my God, I need to eat that, and I need to eat that, and I need to eat that. And I just end up, for fear of that food literally just taking off and leaving and me not having access to it, like I was unable to make the choice and go, no, actually, just stop for a second, Rishi. Which one do you actually want? Which one do you actually need? What do you like? Choose, decide, not pick everything off the menu and eat it all. Or you could pick everything off the menu and take half home and have it the next day, or share it with someone or whatever. That's also a nice thing that actually I do with you know, when I go out and stuff. It's again, it's something that I think is really like a good tactic, is if you do want to try a bit of everything, going for a meal with someone that equally wants to try everything, and you can get you, but you get to order more, but you don't eat all of it. You just have like a bit of
mm.
everything. I really like that. Actually, I do that with my sister quite a bit when we go out to eat together, because we always just want like everything. So it's like take my nieces, and we were like, yeah, we'll just have everything, and everyone gets to pick, and you all get to try, and you know, whatever. A bit like, I
Yeah.
don't know, is that like a dim sum, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think obviously, in you know, in a lot of cultures, that's quite the norm, really.
Yeah,
You know, I think in a lot of, I mean, my family from the Caribbean, they do
yeah,
that over there. I know in a lot of Asian cultures, that's
yeah,
very popular as well. And I think that that's a good way. You know, it's a good way definitely to try lots of different foods, without necessarily feeling that you need to eat
yeah,
every single plate.
yeah,
And I think it just goes for the fact that food is often a very social occasion. And I think that also does fill into the idea of, you know, people's worries about judgment. Because oftentimes when we are eating, you know, we're eating with other people. And let's say if we double down on the idea of sharing, you know, it might be that we then feel that we can't engage in that social aspect of eating, because maybe sharing is a part of that entire, I suppose, you know, eating experience, which can obviously make it a lot more difficult as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of that. I mean, I like ordering a lot and then maybe sharing a few things. But if I've got something that I very much like, then I might be inclined to say no, this is all mine.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's just, again, it's just there are different approaches that I would use for my clients. Do you feel like there's anything else that you want to touch on without this being another 2 hours? We could say that, this is a topic that you could talk about for hours and hours. But yeah, is there anything else that you've kind of can say on emotional eating? Anything that you really wanted to kind of get out about?
Yeah, I think the main lesson that came to my head is that, obviously eating and emotional eating is because we're trying to make ourselves feel good. And when we say emotional eating, I think it's important to sort of state, what emotional eating is. And I suppose my sort of definition, and the definition that I speak to my clients about, is literally where you notice that, your mood drops or your mood changes, and then you notice that you begin to eat as an accommodating, I suppose, behavior, to sort of try and sort of manage your own mood. Now, emotional eating in that sense sort of has quite negative connotations, I guess, because it might be that we do just have a little chocolate and it does pick us up, and there's nothing wrong with that,
No.
nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that at all. And I'm not saying that you should never ever eat something when you're feeling bad. That's not what I'm saying. Food is to be enjoyed, in my opinion. I enjoy eating food a lot, and I definitely eat a lot of food. Some people might argue too much, but I'll leave that. I'll leave that to them. But no, nonetheless, um, there are other alternatives basically, because essentially what the function there is that we're trying to make ourselves feel good. And if you want to be really sort of boiling it down and make it as robotic as possible, you can say is, I'm just trying to get that dopamine rush. And there are other ways that we can do that, which are, I suppose, more productive for us. So
Yeah.
this is obviously dependent on personal preference. Some people like to go outside for a walk. Some people like to go and throw some weights around. Some people like to go and spend time with friends. Some people like to go and watch, I don't know, their favorite
Movie.
comedian.
Yeah.
All of these are completely, eligible ways in order to improve our mood. And eating is just one of them. But it's not the only one. So, if you want to be really, like I said, robotic about it, then you can just try and swap something else for it. If you want to, if you do notice that at a particular time you do just feel worse and you do want to eat, then maybe just do a little bit of an experiment with yourself to then try something else. Now, obviously, if you're hungry, then eat, right? I'm not saying neglect your hunger, but it might be that you say, all right, well, I'm not feeling too good. Let me go and maybe just take myself for a walk. It sounds very cliche, but it's the first thing that came into my head. Or
But
I'm gonna go and
no
watch.
harm can be done from going out for a walk unless you literally trip over something and fall. But
Exactly.
honestly, most of the time, you feel crap. You get out for a walk. You feel that the air hit your face, the wind hit your face, and you just feel heart rate comes up, and it's just so good. It's just such a nice. I love that. I love just going out for a walk. So no, yeah, sorry to cut in there, but yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So it might be that you then go ahead and do that, exactly like you mentioned. You just go and take yourself outside for 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't have to be long. And
Mm.
then let's say you come back and then you still notice that you're not feeling too good. Then it might be that, yeah, maybe I will try and eat something. And it might be something that you just pick yourself up on, whether it be like a piece of chocolate or something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, having done something that makes you feel a little bit better, it will reduce the urge to want to go ahead and, eat a
Yeah.
packet of crisps or eat a chocolate or something like that. And really, our entire lives is literally trial and error. Sometimes you will do things and it will work. Sometimes you'll do things and it won't work. So what you have to do is you kind of have to be your own little scientist, and your body and your brain is your experiment. And you got to think, okay, well, if I'm feeling this way, what can I potentially do that might make it feel a little bit better. And it does require conscious thought. It does require, I suppose, active participation. But if you're able to do that, then it just gives you a lot more influence over yourself, and it allows you to maybe test out a couple other things and make some positive changes, or changes that you view as positive, and sort of change some of the behaviors that you don't necessarily want to do as much. So, swapping out that quote unquote emotional eating with something else, I guess, that you
Yeah.
enjoy, or that you want to do, and just see if it changes anything. And then if it does, then fantastic. If it doesn't, then back to the drawing board. Try
Yeah.
something else next time.
Yeah, of course. I love that. And I'd say that same thing helps with reward as well. So I know it's not like on this topic, but when we're thinking about reward as well, not making like reward being around food, but reward being around other things that give you that sense of, happiness, and they help you relax, and they make you feel happy. It's not just always about opting for food or opting for, I don't know, alcohol or whatever it is, because that's a whole nother topic is alcohol, right? Not my remit. I don't deal with people who are struggling alcoholics at all. That's not me at all. But I'm sure that's something that you deal with yourself. But it's like you say, swapping out and having other ways of making yourself feel good, and also rewarding yourself as well. And another thing that I want to sort of say is that we talked about values earlier. So as long as things are aligning with your values, food restriction, like we don't do that. I have 2 advent calendars. I'm very lucky. My partner bought me 2. He couldn't decide which one to get, but he bought them for me on the 2nd of December. So he was a day late already. So hey, I'm having both those chocolates each day. But no, it's just to say that it's not about exclusion here. It's if you are on a journey and you are looking at weight loss or fat loss or toning or whatever that is, it's not about going, oh my God, I can't eat X, Y, and Z. My job is to help you allow the foods that you love without restricting on anything, and without forcing you to eat anything you don't want to eat, but allowing you to do things, giving you the tools to do things the way that align with you and your values, in a way that can still help you achieve your results and your goals and stuff. I don't make my clients eat vegan. They might be more aligned to working with me because they enjoy more plant-based food, but I don't force anyone to do anything. We look at what they do currently and we make adjustments. And again, me being a vegan and someone else being a vegan, we will not have the same likes and dislikes as the same types of foods. So it's just, again, giving people the tools to do what they want and still get the results. Because, a lot of it's down to education, and, there are no demonizations of foods as well. And I think that's another thing when people are feeling rotten and they have that tendency to binge or choose foods that makes them feel even more worse, is because in their mind, either they've restricted that or they've got that thing of, when I'm feeling crap and there's no turning back, I'm just going to go straight for that thing that I know is really bad, because it's that whole self-sabotage thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it just goes to show, how much of an impact, the way that we think about certain foods or the way that we think about training has, on our ability to actually sort of engage in that. And oftentimes, yeah, it does need to come from a change of mindset, which is very much linked to the idea of values. So I'm glad that you are obviously, aware of that sort of with your clients, and, taking that into account as well. Because yeah, if you can get people's behavior in line with values and make people aware of what is important to them, then that makes things a hell of a lot easier. Because you can bring a horse to water, but you can't force the horse to drink. But if you show the horse what is important to it and why water is really important, then the horse is a hell of a lot more likely to actually drink. So it also has to be a pretty intelligent horse as well, for keeping it within the analogy. But nonetheless, yeah, that's all important stuff for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Joe, I think this is probably a good time to leave things. So firstly, I just want to say thank you for jumping on this podcast with me. I've learned so much. I think you've got a real art in the way that you describe things as well. And obviously this is your profession. This is something that you're sort of well versed in. You've had a variety of different scenarios and clients that you've worked with. And yeah, no, I just really want to thank you for basically offering your thoughts, your opinions, your professional, I don't know, thing on this topic, your professional outlook on this topic, and offering some really good things that I feel like I'm going to implement with my clients and also implement myself. And for those of you that are listening, thank you so much, firstly, for making it this far. It's been a long episode, but I feel like there's been so many different topics that we've taught on. There's been so much value as well. Joe's obviously got a wealth of knowledge within this area. And if you have any questions or you want to contact Joe, you want to reach out to him directly and gain some more support and understand a little bit more about what he does, Joe, can you tell people where they can find you? Where can they message you?
Yeah. So the only sort of real social media that I am active on is on TikTok. So if you go on to TikTok, my username is literally my name. So it's joe.frederick. So Frederick being Frederick. And then there is my email address sort of in my TikTok bio, which is joemfrederick@gmail.com. So yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I do get a lot of people just sending me odd emails asking about certain things. So I'm happy to be a bit of a dictionary or thesaurus, even if needed. And yeah, you can reach me there. But also just to say thank you for having me on Reach You. I very much enjoyed the conversation, and it's always really interesting to sort of speak to, a professional that clearly knows a lot about nutrition, about fitness, about dieting and some of the common problems that people might experience, because obviously I have a good understanding about the brain and how to work with people, but obviously you have a wealth of knowledge as well about how that or how the body can really impact people as well. So it's nice to have a bit more of a holistic conversation, looking at it from both ends rather than just sort of one lens. So thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. And for those of you that have been listening, this has been the Girl Boss Method podcast. I've been your host, Richu Bra. You can find me on Instagram or contact me via Richu Bra. That's spelled RICHUBRAR. And we'll see you here next time.